before we get into it, just some contact details and this kind of thing. And I'll share this slide again at the end, so you don't need to worry if you can't get it noted down now. But this URL is where you'll be able to find these slides at the end of the presentation. So, spoilers. What I'm going to tell you just before that at the end is that having an entire marketing funnel built on just organic search has basically become borderline impossible for most businesses in 2024. However, there are still some opportunities, some sort of chinks in Google's armor. But before we get into that, what are we going to talk about? So I'm going to tell you about the opportunities that I do think exist. I'm going to tell you about what I think that funnel can look like for you today. I'm going to tell you what I think happens next in maybe the next year or so. But first, I hope you'll humor me. I just want to take a brief look at history of search intent as a concept. So this gentleman is called Andre Broder. Now, way back in 1999 and until 2002, he worked with the job title actually sort of slightly similar to the one I have, but at Alta Vista. So for those of you who have not been around too long, and I won't pretend that I was paying attention, I was a child in 1999, but Alta Vista was one of those other search engines that was in the running before Google kind of won the search engine race. And this is where Andre worked. Now, he was he still is actually, an expert in information retrieval. So information retrieval is a discipline of computer science. And this is the discipline that sort of spawned search engines. So early search engines were essentially produced by information retrieval academics. But in 2002, 22 years ago now, he sensed that a change was coming, a change that to his mind was quite radical, perhaps even a little bit frightening. And he wrote this paper, and you don't need to read the screenshot, but if you've got 10 minutes spare at some point, I would actually recommend you go and dig up this paper. It's free to access online. It's not very long. It's quite easy to read. It's not like some academic papers. It's an interesting piece of SEO history. This is the bit that I want to draw your attention to. So he says, behind a web search is often not informational. So remember, the whole point in search engines, to Andre's mind and in the world's mind in general at this point, the whole point of search engines is information retrieval. That's what they were built for. But he says the intent is sometimes navigational or transactional. Now, not only was this shocking and scandalous at the time, but it's remarkable that in 2002, this was written by someone who didn't and doesn't work in marketing. These category labels, navigational, transactional, informational, he came up with these, and we still use these today. In his excitement, he also tried to imagine a near future with a radically different type of search engine. So he called these third generation search engines, which would attempt to blend data from multiple sources, and a query to San Francisco might present links to a map, a server, a weather server. That all sounds familiar, right? Amusingly, if you do actually Google San Francisco, you see something that is what we would call now quite an old-fashioned search. So maybe his example query wasn't the best guess, but we can forgive that error. That what he's actually describing there is something that we're all familiar with and is very common these days. A slightly less forgivable error. He doesn't make any mention of this really obvious parallel. Like I say, he's not a marketer. He probably wasn't thinking of or never thought of marketing funnels at this time. A lot of SEOs will think about a funnel when they think about intents. They'll think about the parallel to working your way down a funnel. However, the search industry obviously did pay attention, and this is an article on the Moz blog from, just some quick math, 17 years ago. And this is talking about these same labels as applied to SEO. Fast forward to 2012, and this is about when I was getting started in SEO. And Broder moved to Google. Now, at Google, we don't know exactly what he worked on, but we do know that also in 2012, Google launched this. No, go, do, buy. These are Google's own labeled search intents. These map on to Andre's pretty closely. Obviously, the exception is that there's a fourth label, which we might call do, or well, they call do, we might call commercial. But it's pretty similar system. And these have also been mentioned in Google's quality rater guidelines with the translation from commonly used phrases in the industry to what Google calls them. And these have been in the quality rater guidelines since the quality rater guidelines were first published, which was also, probably not by coincidence, in 2012. Obviously, meanwhile, in the industry, a lot of people have made this parallel. So although I work at Moz, as was mentioned in the introduction, I mainly work with Stat. So Stat is a company within the Moz brand. Stat is our sort of enterprise rank tracking platform. So I mainly work within Stat, which is part of Moz. And this is a post from the Stat blog in 2016, so 8 years ago. I'm not going to pretend that Stat was ahead of the curve in some way here. It's very common in the SEO industry for a long time now to sort of map these intents onto a funnel that looks like this one. So that's what we're talking about today. We're going to work our way down that funnel. We're going to talk about the concept of search intent as we work our way down and how we can actually figure out the intent of a search. There's going to be a bunch of data in today's presentation. I was watching Judith's session before, and she said that if you didn't like spreadsheets, you're going to have a bad time. By coincidence, I'm actually drinking from a I Love Spreadsheets mug, so I think I'm okay. There aren't spreadsheets in this presentation, but I am going to be talking about a lot of data. There's going to be some charts. They're pretty simple to follow, but I'll explain it as we go. Where most of this data comes from is this system. So this is Moz's search intent model. We have this available by API. That's how I made this deck, was off the back of our API. It's not expensive. You could replicate this yourself. The starting price for a tier, including the API, is like $10 or something. This isn't an advert, but I'm just saying you can go and replicate this data yourself, so you don't need to trust that I'm telling you something I've made up or something like this. But it's a two-stage process. So we have a machine learning classifier, basically natural language processing, that looks at the query and the results for a given search. And then we also have some rules based on search features. So Google kind of gives away, based on what's on the search, often what the intent is going to be. So one of the interesting things we've noticed is that if you have one keyword, so particularly if you're comparing different markets in the same language, right? If you have one keyword, you might expect it to always have the same intent. So if I tell you the keyword is badgers, you might assume that that's always going to have the same intent, but it's actually not the case. There's a lot of keywords that have a different intent. So about 23% of keywords will have a different intent if you just change the device. So you stay in the same location, same keyword, you change the device, different intent. And that kind of makes sense. You can imagine if I search for food on my phone, I'm doing something different to if I search for food on a desktop, right? This question in the sidebar: what advanced analytics tools do you use to monitor shifts in search behavior? That's a bit of a tangent, so I'll come back to that at the end if that's okay. Similarly, if we change location, so if I were to make the same search in the US versus UK, but with the same keyword and the same device, about 34% of the time that would result in a different intent. You might also be thinking now, if you thought about this problem at all before, you might be thinking, a lot of keywords actually have multiple intents, and that's true. So this is an example. This is a search for ramen made from the Stat office in Vancouver. And you can see that there's a sort of definitional, sort of informational up here, but then the map is showing me places where I might leave the front door and immediately go and purchase some some ramen. So the map is sort of serving a more transactional intent. And then the organic link, particularly the first one, is more informational. And we've got the knowledge graph as well. So there's kind of two things going on here. What we try to do with our model is, as much as possible, we will tell you which intent is most prominent. So which is sort of the dominant intent of a SERP. And that's because the feedback from our users has been that that's what they find most useful. If whenever there was some ambiguity, we just said it was mixed, then we'd end up telling you that it was mixed all the time and the data would no longer be useful. So we try to give you one dominant intent. Nonetheless, there's about 3% of cases where we basically can't pick. It's a complete coin toss, which is the dominant intent, like that ramen example. So only in 97% of cases are we able to identify a dominant intent, and that's the data that I'm going to be talking about today. If you are interested in the 3% and what combinations are common, things mixed with transactional tends to be how it goes. So that ramen example I just showed you fits into the largest bar of the data that I used for this study, which is informational plus transactional. So there's some informational intent and there was some transactional, and it was difficult to pick which was dominant. Since I originally started thinking about this model, so we've been working on this for a couple of years now. Obviously, we had the Google leaks this spring, just gone, and the Google leaks talked about identifying the commerciality of intent. And this is a quote from Mike King, who has an excellent write-up of those leaks. And he talks about something that I've observed myself in the past, which is that on some mixed intent SERPs, so for example, if you are a transactional business on that ramen SERP, you can probably never rank in the top two. Those top two positions are locked out for informational. So in that sense, these mixed intent SERPs can have a limited opportunity because there's only so many ranking positions that are available for any one page. So that's a bit of discussion on how we actually go about identifying intents. Let's get into the funnel like I said I was going to. So this is the research that I'm sharing data from today. So I took 10,000 queries from Keyword Planner, so it's just the top 500 from 20 different sectors. I tracked it in 2 different devices in 2 different locations, so 40,000 total SERPs. Then I categorized it using the API I just mentioned. So up first at the top of the funnel, we have informational intent, and again, this is one of Andre's labels. And from a marketer's point of view, this is at the awareness phase, right? This is right at the top. So this is an example of an informational search. English Premier League table. Those of you who are nerdy about football will be able to tell exactly when I took this screenshot. This is a conversion rate. Again, this is pretty informational. This is medical definition. What is pneumonia, basically? And you notice this. All 3 of those examples I just showed you, all 3 of them had big above the fold features, and that is a pretty common characteristic of informational search results. Now, feature snippets, like you see here, they're a particularly strong signal of an informational search. So I have a few charts like this one. So just to explain, on an average search, about 4% of the time we'll have a feature snippet. About 4% of searches in this study had a feature snippet of any kind. 16% of informational searches had a feature snippet. So it's 4 times as common for informational searches. What's also pretty common is these knowledge graphs, like I shared. So they come in many shapes. This is that Premier League standings one. About 50% more likely on an informational search than on a typical search. And then people also ask, again, they used to be almost ubiquitous. A couple of years ago, basically every search had people also ask. That's not true anymore, but on informational searches, they are still there, 85% of the time. But what's really interesting is how these combine. So what we saw a lot of the time on informational searches was patterns like this, where you have one of these big features, and then people also ask. And on most screens, that means you will not see anything else in the search results. So you can see this example on the right, the Mayo Clinic with an organic result is just about appearing on the bottom of my laptop screen. I have a reasonably large laptop. So yeah, they can end up feeling quite difficult to play in informational search. And even if you do manage to appear, a lot of people are just going to read the answer off the search and, zero click, right? This looks set to get even worse. Obviously, we've been seeing these for quite a while in the US and UK now, but they're rolling out in more and more places. I think informational searches, and certainly what we see in our data so far at Stat, informational searches are the logical home for AI overviews. At the moment, about 95% of all AI overviews that we see are on informational searches. So they're in places where there used to be a feature snippet. Often, sometimes there's a feature snippet as well, and then people also ask. So it's like AI overview, feature snippet. People also ask. So yeah, good luck trying to get a click out of this search. So yeah, regular organic is a pretty tough game. We actually see a lower share of voice for organic and informational than we do for some of the steps further down the funnel. So on that note, maybe you're thinking, okay, look, informational search looks pretty hard these days. I don't want to bother trying to compete here with my business. Maybe I can use some other channels for the awareness stage. Maybe I'm going to do above the line advertising. Maybe I'm going to try and work on social or something like this. For my awareness phase, I'm going to get in on commercial. I'm going to come in a bit further down the funnel. So we're here now. We're in what traditional marketers would call the consideration phase. So this is an example of a commercial search. You can see a lot of different adverts, but also product listings being thrown at me. This is another example. So this is not quite, and this is a good illustration. This is not quite, I want to head out of my front door and immediately buy something to eat. This is, I'm looking for dinner ideas. I'm not actually going to purchase right away. I'm interested in purchasing, but I'm not going to purchase right away. Houseplants. So again, there's a lot of category pages here. So I want to go and maybe read on some information, or I want to browse some different options. I'm not instantly probably going to make a conversion of the search term houseplants. One of the features that we see is really common it's technically a rich result, not a feature, that we see is really common on commercial searches is these sort of price, normally driven by structured data markup. So again, about twice as common on commercial searches as they are on a typical search. We also see these a lot more in the UK than in the US. For some reason, I don't know if Google has decided that British customers are maybe more price sensitive or something like that. Ratings, again, much more common on commercial searches than they are elsewhere. Not quite by such a large margin, but still definitely more common. So that tells you something. If price and ratings are very common on commercial searches, and that tells you something about the kind of pages which are ranking. So the kind of pages which are ranking here are probably going to be product and review pages, because those are the pages that have these types of markup typically. In terms of standalone features, popular products, significantly more common on commercial searches than elsewhere. Images, again, you're sort of being shown various options, things to consider, slightly more common. Discussion in forums, quite a controversial feature. It's basically Reddit, but about twice as common. So this is a diverse range of search features. But what about trying to well, actually, it's also a lot of these can pass, not just their diverse range of search features. A lot of those features I just mentioned are features that will actually pass traffic to your website, right? Like it's not like a knowledge graph where there's no chance of you, and knowledge panel where there's no chance of you actually getting a click. So there's some opportunity here. But how is organic itself doing? Organic tends to be dominated by some pretty big sites for commercial searches. Reddit and Amazon are the two big beasts here, where they're both far more common on commercial searches than they are typically. So this, even though organic has some opportunity here, it can be difficult it can be difficult to compete just because the strength of the sites you're going up against is that much higher. And we see that so this is domain authority, Moz metric. This is domain authority for each stage of the average domain authority in the top 10 for each stage in the funnel. And you can see commercial is highest. And I should comment that domain authority is a log-based metric for those of you who are slightly math nerds in the audience. I'm definitely among you. So the difference between 82 and 80 is not small. The difference between 82 and 80 might be in the region of double in terms of strength. It's one of these metrics where each additional point is harder to gain. So this is a big difference. We see the same thing with brand authority, where it's typically much stronger brands in commercial searches than the stages before and after in the funnel. So speaking of which, maybe we're thinking, okay, I don't want to compete with Amazon and Reddit. That's too difficult. So I'm going to move a bit further down and we're going to look at transactional searches. So this is the conversion phase. This is searchers who are basically immediately ready to buy. So this is an example, and you tend to see the ads getting really aggressive at this stage. This is an unusual example. This is a transactional search where it's all organic. But people searching for used cars typically are already ready to make a purchase. Near me food. So this is not dinner ideas. This is near me food. This is actually from where I live, not from the office. And this is, I want to leave my front door and immediately buy something. I'm hungry. You'll notice that all of those examples I just shared you had some kind of implicitly local angle. Even if I'm buying a used car, I don't want to travel across the country to buy a used car. I want to go somewhere, within an hour or two, right? And so we see that local packs are overwhelmingly common on transactional searches. About half of transactional searches have a local pack compared to a quarter of typical results. We also see these, this is Google's response to the accusation that Google Maps is anti-competitive. So you've got some links to some alternatives. And similarly, it's more common on these transactional searches. However, those are the only two search features which are disproportionately common on transactional searches. So you might be thinking, what else is filling up the space then? Because it isn't organic. And the answer, you might have guessed, is ads. Ads are also overwhelming here. So, okay, that's all pretty depressing. What happens at the bottom of the funnel? So navigational, I think this is basically, I've either already converted, I've converted in the past, I'm already familiar with the brand. This is kind of post-conversion. So a lot of people would illustrate this as maybe like a loop at the bottom of the funnel or something like this. And in search, this is pretty close to being brand. It's not exactly. This is basically people who already have a website in mind to visit. So it's not exactly branded search, but it's pretty close to branded search. This is an example, an Olive Garden menu, Amazon gift card, Department of Homeland Security. It's pretty obvious there is a specific web page that I'm looking for in all of these cases. And one of the common signifiers is these expanded site links. Google only does this when they're really confident that the top result is the one you're looking for. So again, these are much more common on navigational searches. I call these Twitter boxes still. Obviously, they're probably called an Xbox, but an Xbox is a games console, so I don't want to cause that confusion. These pretty common on branded searches, as you can imagine. Everyone tries to rank with their branded Twitter profile. App download, obviously only on mobile. News, Google likes to show news about brands. This is quite a recent change. Branded searches didn't used to have news results that much, but now they're pretty common. So yeah, these are all the kind of features, and none of these percentages are super high, but these are all the kind of features that you expect to see on a good branded search. And which ones are there basically depends on which kinds of social platform or other, parasite SEO that this brand has particularly gone for. If we look at the top organic sites that are ranking, you've got Reddit, as we see kind of everywhere, but YouTube, Wikipedia, Instagram, Facebook, these are all domains that you might try and appear on with your own brands to block out that branded search, right? So I've just dumped a huge amount of data on you. This was the end of those charts. So if you were struggling to digest all of that data, I apologize, but that's done now. What can we actually take away from this? So when we talked about informational at the top of the search, that was full of features above the fold. When we talked about commercial, we said that the organic competition was maybe a bit too tough. When we talked about transactional, we said it looked a little bit like pay to play unless you are a brick and mortar business that could appear in the local pack. So full funnel organic, like I said at the start, is really hard. And probably for most businesses, at least one step in the funnel is going to need to involve other channels. And that's probably something that you had noticed already. So it is more important than ever to use multiple channels. But there are points of vulnerability for organic, and depending on your vertical, and depending on your strengths, there may be opportunities for you. So top of funnel organic is still viable in some verticals. Now, I said feature snippets like they were blocking you out. Obviously, feature snippets kind of are an organic result. You can appear in a feature snippet. You just need to identify whether you're going to be able to. Like, is the kind of site that's appearing, the kind of content that's appearing, kind of domain that's appearing, something that you can compete with and maybe get into this feature snippet? If so, there's lots of advice written about how to structure your content in ways that Google will use for this kind of query. Or using a platform like Stat, you can find informational keywords that don't have feature snippets. So you can filter in the platform, or probably in your own rank tracker or keyword research tool of choice. You can also do it. You can filter for keywords which are informational and where regular organic is in position 1, like this example here. So this is just adding another layer to your keyword research, because your keyword research obviously was not tedious enough before. Now I'm giving you a little bit more work. So you need to add a little bit more qualifications. So you're not just saying what is a keyword with high volume and low difficulty or something like that. You're saying what is a keyword with high volume, low difficulty. It's informational because that's the stage in the funnel that I'm targeting, and it doesn't have a knowledge graph or a feature snippet in position 1. Similarly, when we move a bit further down, I said commercial SERPs were typically very highly contested by strong domains. That is typically true, but it's not always true. So in some verticals, the average domain authority in the top 10 for a commercial search is much lower. So arts, hobbies, real estate, we didn't have these overwhelmingly strong sites. You'll notice none of these are areas really where Amazon is as big as it is in some of these others. And a little bit of a tip, if you aren't using a system like Moz or Stat and you want to identify commercial intent, if you see any of these modifiers, best, compare, top, reviews, if this is part of the keyword, that correlates pretty highly with being a commercial search. Moving a bit further down, I said transactional is either local or ads. And you might be thinking, well, I'm not a brick and mortar business, so I can't, and I don't want to pay all that money for ads, so I can't really compete. You probably can. You can still play local. There's lots of ways that a business which is not a brick and mortar business, or maybe even one that is and is also in the local pack, can also compete for local organic. Local organic is basically long tail, and it tends to be much easier to compete in. So you might remember that example I shared of used cars, and some of the pages ranking were not national used car pages, they were local to me. So if I have a page which is targeting used cars in Newbury or something like that, that is going to, Newbury's where I live, then that is going to, if I search for Newbury, it will rank just for used cars, and it will be against pages which are much weaker than the national equivalents and sites which are much weaker than the national equivalents. So this is kind of long tail organic, but because it's so far down the funnel, it can pay for itself. And obviously you saw, all of those used car sites had made local landing pages for my area because they identify that this opportunity is worthwhile. Again, if you see a location in a search term, it actually correlates really well with it being surprisingly, it correlates really well with it being a transactional search. The exception obviously being sort of tourist locations, because those tend to have more informational search. So the last thing I want to talk to you about is what I think happens next. Where is this going in the next year or so? So I think for informational search, you've sort of got an ever rising bar of what is good enough to qualify for a click. So a long time ago, if you were trying to compete with pages answering these kind of simple questions, if you were a site that had landing pages for queries like how old is Vin Diesel, you probably went out of business a decade ago, because feature snippets kind of destroyed that business model. Then, not that long after, we had all these knowledge graph results. So if you were a weather site, or if you were offering currency conversions on your site, that's gotten really hard, right? Like, not many businesses are getting clicks from organic doing this anymore. And now it's gone a bit further. The bar has got even higher. If your content is explaining a concept, it kind of looks like Google is gonna do that for you. So each time this happens, your content needs to be more thorough, it needs to be more personal, it needs to be more expertise driven in order for it to be worth users clicking on. And that will continue happening. So the age where SEO was about having a huge amount of very basic content that just went after a simple keyword, that's probably not going to cut it anymore. It needs to be more in depth. It needs to offer something unique. For commercial, I think this remains the sweet spot for organic search, but it is incredibly volatile. There are search features here, but you can appear in them. But a lot of Google's recent updates are targeted directly at commercial. When you think of the helpful content update, when you think of product review updates, when you think of all this, affiliate fighting they've been doing, all of this is aimed at these consideration phase searches. This is a chart you may have seen before. This is Mozcast, which is our sort of algorithm flux. I should update this screenshot actually, because this only goes up to the end of last year. But I remember over here, label 1. This is the last big Panda update. Now, I was in the office on this day. I'd been in SEO for a couple of years at the time, and I worked at an SEO agency. I remember when this update happened, the phones were ringing off the hook all morning. Clients were very concerned. Some of them were panicking. Even the ones that hadn't been effective, saying, "Oh, I've heard this Panda update. What's happening?" That day, the day of the Panda 4 update, that would have been the least volatile day of 2023. So we've gotten so used to an enormous amount of flux in rankings that when many of us started in SEO, including myself, would have been unthinkable. Then transactional, can Google take even more? Yes, probably. So at the moment, transactional, a lot of it is ads, but Google is also wading into a lot of these spaces and just taking the money directly. Flights is one example, but you also see them moving into things like takeaway food, for example. We also noticed when AI overviews were in beta and they were called SGEs, Search Generative Experience, back then they were also experimenting with transactional AI overviews, and we've seen them starting to do this again. So this is something that I predict in the next year. You're going to see ads and you're going to see local packs for transactional searches in AI overviews. So if you remember nothing else, 4 keyword research considerations for you to add to your workflow. So if you're looking for informational keywords, filter your keyword research by its informational, and there's organic in position 1. If you're looking for commercial keywords, either filter for commercial plus low difficulty, or low domain authority, or filter for commercial plus winnable search features, search features that you think you can appear in. If you're looking for transactional, look for local long tail keywords. Where can you get this data? So this is live in Moz Pro right now. Moz Pro is available for free trial, or with an API starting at $10 a month. We also have it coming very soon to Stat, our rank tracking platform. This is a screenshot from beta, and some customers have access to this already. So yep, that's all. As I said at the start, all my slides are available at this URL. Thank you very much. I've tried to move reasonably quickly because I know we started a bit late, so we may have time for some questions. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Tom, it's really satisfying presentation first, and thank you so much on my behalf. And I guess everyone is really happy about it because it was really educational. So thank you so much again for being with us and for the great presentation. Yeah, we have some questions. I can see 2 of them, and we still have 5 minutes. And if our attendees would like to ask something, please just type your question here, or I guess from the Twitter and LinkedIn, they can direct us to you, Tom. But
Yeah.
Let me read the first question to you. What advanced analytics tools do you use to monitor shifts in search behavior? One of our attendees asked this.
So there's two sides to this. So if you're asking this about me as an SEO or about you as a business, you're probably more interested in whether people are finding your sites in different ways, right? So you probably have first-party data from Google Search Console, where you can say, well, not first-party, but you know what I mean, first-person, I guess, data from Google Search Console, where you can say, you know, this is the click-through rate from this keyword to my site now. How has that changed over time? These are the keywords that people are using, this kind of thing. That's not particularly advanced analytics tool. That's just Search Console, right? But it's what you do with it and how you store and model that data. If you're looking more at the industry at large, if you're someone like me, you have access to clickstream data. That's not practical for most people. But in clickstream data, and you see people like Rand often publish this information. We don't publish this kind of data at Moz. There's some ethical considerations, but there are plenty of people that do publish data like this. So you can see, for example, he put out a study recently showing that basically ChatGPT still drives less traffic than DuckDuckGo to people's websites. So this is the kind of thing you can track with that kind of data. And honestly, I would recommend you just look at third-party studies rather than trying to procure this data yourself, because it's really, really expensive and doesn't drill down well to sort of one website or something like this that's receiving traffic.
Yeah. Thank you. And the next question is, how do you leverage machine learning to predict future search intents based on historical data?
I actually don't, but it's an interesting idea. We could do that. So if I understand correctly, we could look at how the intents that we have on record for keywords in our corpus over time have changed, and they definitely do change. And we could try and model that, maybe using some kind of keyword clustering or grouping for identifying types of keyword that change over time. I think the easiest part of this would be seasonality. I've definitely noticed that some keywords change at some times of year. So the most obvious thing would be searches about Christmas are sort of informational in the summer and transactional in the winter, right? Because people go from being interested in the history of Christmas to wanting to buy presents. So yeah, that's not something I've done, but it's definitely something we could do. And yeah, thanks for the idea.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, by the way, and thank you so much for the answer. I guess we have all the questions answered right now. So if any other questions, you can directly ask Tom via this email and also Twitter, I guess. And Tom, thank you again so much for being with us and for the satisfying presentation.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. See you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks.